Greetings, fellow dwarves. Radaman here. Thank you for tuning in to the first episode of a new series covering Dwarf Fortress. If you would like to skip the game's overview or the setup for this series, please use YouTube chapters. Dwarf Fortress is a game where you live in an intricately simulated world as the architect of a dwarven city. Build a fortress to try to help your dwarves survive against the hostile and unforgiving world. The goal of this series is to slowly and methodically build an illustrious and well-architected fortress for our dwarves to thrive in. I'll be using a procedurally generated world, so let's create the world now. So we're going to go to Create New World. I'm not going to change any of these default settings. So medium, 100 years, mediums, and everywhere. Basically, the standard. And we'll generate this world. And it's generating 100 years of, like, history here. So, it takes a minute. It's generating factions. It's generating events. It's forming the environment and rivers and creating mega beasts and now historical occurrences. You don't really need to know what's happening in the top left. It's just like the founding of certain cities and some major events that happen as the continent populates from different factions. And there we go. This is our world. All right, if we hit play now, it's going to prepare to drop us into the game. So it's saving the world now that we like its world generation. I didn't actually look at it too closely, but it looks good enough for our purposes. And then once the world is done, there is different game modes. I'll be doing in Fortress mode, which is the traditional, but there's Adventurer if you want to control like a single dwarf and go on adventures. And then Legends, which is like, history deep diving or so. As I say in the description, I am not going to be doing the tutorial. And the reason is the tutorial has you embark in a tile that you do not control. So the tutorial is really short. It's really only like 10 individual missions, which you can fly through pretty quickly. And it explains the very basics, which I'll be doing anyway on my own. So I'm going to skip the tutorial. All right. So this is the world we have. And the first thing I want to do is choose origin. Actually, before we even choose the origin civilization of what faction we belong to, I would like to try to find an embark location so that I am choosing the origin faction closest to my chosen embark. So let's go to the embark location. And what this is doing is it's searching the entire 81 tile map, because these are broken into 9x9s, and it's finding something that meets your preference. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say Fluxstone yes, aquifers no. So Fluxstone is, let me hide the UI a little bit so you can see it. Fluxstone is stone required in metallurgy, and aquifers is like if there's underground water supply. Aquifers can be kind of annoying because if you run into aquifers, they will like flood your cities, and it will really significantly impact how you can architect your city because you have to work around the water and the like. Another thing I want to do is to have at least some soil. So I can have a subsurface farm, an underground farm. And for savagery, we're going to go wilderness. And for spirit, we're going to go normal. So talking about this a little bit, there is different levels of savagery. Calm is a savagery where like nothing big is coming to kill you on average. Whereas Untamed Wilds, you can get stomped really quickly. Dwarf Fortress is one of those games where like you might just happen upon like an endgame boss really early on. Forgotten Beast, which just like eats you and everybody in your colony. It's why playing Dwarf Fortress is referred to as losing is fun, because you don't really control all the variables, and those variables can kill you very quickly. So it could be a Forgotten Beast, which is like a giant boss mob that like kills you really early on. It could be like werewolves or vampires. I mean, who knows what it would be. But generally speaking, if your spirit is not evil and your savagery is not Untamed Wilds or something like that, you're going to be more likely to survive and less likely to require an extreme amount of turtling. So wilderness is sort of neutral and spirit is neutral. And good spirit isn't necessarily good. There can be negative consequences of good spirit. So I'm just neutral across the board as it's described. Then, at this point, we're going to search. So there's some other factors that I'm going to consider as well. I don't really want extreme biomes. I'm not looking to live in a volcano or live in a snow, a snowpack or anything like that. And then on top of that, it wouldn't hurt to have some trees on our starting map tile. So if I could have a river or trees, sand or clay, that would be great. It's not necessarily required, but it's roughly something I'll be looking for. All right. So what it's doing is it's scanning the map tiles for an embark location where we would start that meets the criteria that I've put in. And the yellow is a no, and the green is a yes. So there are some spots that are valid. And it looks like this spot down here, around this mountain range, might be where I choose, because this spot doesn't look like it has many trees. So now that we've searched the entire map, you can see if we zoom in, there are some spots here that meet the criteria, like this. However, this is a low trees, low vegetation sand desert, so it's not really something that's going to meet our needs. We do have some spots in this area. None of them are on a river, though. And it's these green squares that I'm checking. Now, we could go way out west. My worry here is there are some really dangerous things adjacent to our embark location, like giant goblin villages. So that would be a little spicy. And it's also pretty far away from civilization. If you're talking about civilization, now that the world is generated, we can go back to the origin civilization. And you can see the Scarlet Corridors settled to the southeast. And there's about 1,600 of them, split up amongst 20 sites. The Works of the Fierceness is probably the most populous. They have almost 4,000 population on 43 sites. And they're sort of central west. The Abbey of Stoking is also southeast next to the Scarlet Corridors, and they're about the same size as the Scarlet Corridors. Just about, nearly identically. You've got the Banners of Elevation, which is way up north. They are very low pop, and then you have the Relic of the Crest, which is also in the southeast. So you have 3 southeast civilizations, one to the west and one to the north. I'm likely to settle somewhere around here. So let's become a Relic of the Crest. They're not the most populous. And what I'm going to try to do is find an embark location sort of west of where... yeah, okay. West of where they would normally have settled. So this spot isn't terrible. It does have clay and a little soil. Barely at all, though. It does have a river. I like rivers because rivers are like a reliable source of water. What city is this? Oh, this is a dwarf city. I don't want to be like right up against other dwarf cities. And that's a bit of a challenge because these mountainous hills are pretty thickly settled. The red boxes aren't necessarily just hostels. Like this is goblins. But a lot of these are other goblins. A lot of these are like elf cities, which aren't necessarily hostile, and dwarf cities, which almost certainly won't be hostile. Unless we, like, mess with them. Oh, this spot's not bad. Clay and a little soil. It's adjacent to... what city is this? A dwarf, 2 dwarf cities, but it's not super on top of it. So that might not be an unreasonable thing, location to settle. I will check a little bit further west to see if there's any areas out here. Because, of course, any choice I make now is quite permanent when we're sort of stuck with it. So, choose wisely. Because it can significantly impact your success. So there's a monastery, a Dwarf Fortress. Okay. Well, let's actually make a choice. So the spot I was looking at was here. Alright, so we hit embark, and we select that spot that has a little soil, clay, flux layer. It's not immediately on top of anyone. Now, normally when you're playing, you could prepare for the journey carefully. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to spend points to modify the skills and equipment and all of that. It allows you to sort of like min-max your start. And I didn't really want to get into that to like design the perfect setup. So what I'm going to do instead is leave enemies on normal, economy on normal, and just hit play now. And in playing now, it is going to give us like a random name for everything. So we're not really making any of the choices ourselves, but I'm okay with that. So it's going to prepare a map, and I hope it's a good one. You have arrived. After a journey from the mountain homes into the forbidding wilderness beyond, your harsh trek has finally ended. Your party of 7 is to make an outpost for the glory of all of Zeneg Zim. There are almost no supplies left, but with stout labor comes sustenance. Whether by bolt, plow, or hook, provide for your dwarves. You are expecting a supply caravan just before winter entombs you, but it is spring now. Enough time to delve secure lodgings, ere the cougars get hungry. A new chapter of Dwarven history begins here at this place. Strike the earth. So our faction is Bolt Mysteries, or Bolts Mysteries. Got it. I'm going to pause the game because there is some housekeeping to do right at the start. So, much like RimWorld, where when you start RimWorld, you might want to do work assignments, scheduling, zoning, food and drug allowances, things like that. Dwarf Fortress is kind of similar, and has some things that you really ought to do before you even unpause the game. So one, we are in a very flat, open area. So there's like no Z level anywhere, which is interesting choice. On top of that, it seems like our caravan has settled not in the center. There's actually only a little bit of trees to the northwest, so it is not thickly covered in trees, as you can see. In the minimap above, you can see the trees more easily. And we put the overlay back. So it is like a prairie land, I guess. I'm not thrilled about the settings, but it is what I chose, ultimately, so I only have myself to blame. It does have a river, of course. We are in a temperate biome, so there's that. Alright. So, to cover the things that we should do immediately, I'm going to be assigning some people to be dedicated miners. So I'm going to have my expedition leader mine, I'm going to have my mason mine, and I'm going to have my miner mine. My miner is the best miner. I also want to do some renaming, but I'll do that in a minute. Woodcutting is going to be our woodcutter. One thing to note about mining and woodcutting, when you mine and when you woodcut, actually I'm going to take the leader off of mining and I'll give it to the metal crafter. When you are a miner or a woodcutter, and some other professions as well, like fisher and so on and so forth, it means that your primary weapon is a tool, meaning that you're not like going to be a fighter. So you shouldn't have your miners and your fighters be one and the same, because they can either have a pick or a sword or an axe or whatever. They can't have both. And the same is true of the woodcutter. I'm not gonna have any hunters initially, and then I'm gonna only have my planter be planting rather than everybody do this. I do have a fisher dwarf. Plant gathering could be anyone. Stone cutting for now could be anyone. Engraving, I only want my mason to do it. And I'm not going to go into haulers just yet. Standing orders. So there's one standing order that I would say is really important really early on, depending on how you want to delve into the underground, which is do not collect webs automatically. The reason is, underneath the ground, there are massive caverns full of, like, resources and monsters and things like that. And if you crack into a cavern and you don't turn off automatic web collection, your people will then go into the caverns, which is almost certainly not going to be safe, and start collecting spider webs to weave them into textiles. And that will get you like super killed. You don't want to be doing that automatically. It's not good. So turn that off. The next thing, the kitchen. Certain foods should definitely not be cooked. Dwarven ale, Dwarven beer, Dwarven rum. Yeah, don't cook it. Additionally, plump helmets, don't cook it. So plump helmets are like mushrooms that you brew beer into. So, from big picture, when you eat a raw food, you keep the seeds. When you brew, you keep the seeds. When you cook, you destroy the seeds. Plump helmets are seeds that we can plant in order to brew beers. But if you cook them, you kill the seeds, you destroy the seeds. They're in the meal and they're gone. If you eat them raw or you brew with them, you keep the seeds. So it's really important to make sure that you are not cooking with your booze or cooking the things that can be brewed. So everything that can be brewed should be on brew only to preserve the seeds. And the types of plants that exist in the world, not all the plants, because some of the default plants we have here are just like the generic Dwarven plants, but the plants that form on the surface are procedurally generated. Same with like meat and animals and stuff like that. Everything is basically procedurally generated. So I'm going to have to check back into the kitchen tab regularly to make sure that we aren't cooking things that could be brewed and we're brewing things that can be brewed, so on and so forth. So that's another really important one to do. All right, another one. Go to work orders. No, not work orders. Where is it? Oh, back into standing orders. Go to siege and forbidding. I am not going to want to claim dead things that we did not hunt. I don't want to be collecting corpses for funsies, so I'm going to turn that off. Because, like, I don't need to be going into caverns where, like, two animals duke it out and I'm, like, trying to grab their corpses. That doesn't make any sense. And it's not all that safe either. Alright, another one is chores. Children will be allowed to do all chores, that's fine for now. And then other. I only want farmers to harvest. Farmers have skills. Everyone does not. So I only want farmers to harvest because I want the best yields possible. So that is another standing order to change. Alright. Another thing to do is to go to the nobles screen where you assign administrators. And right off the bat, I'm going to assign our expedition leader to be the militia commander. Also the manager, because they're going to have multiple roles, the broker, and the bookkeeper. So to explain what this is, the militia commander is, well, pretty self-explanatory. The person that is responsible for controlling your military, I guess. Your manager handles work orders, and work orders allow you to do things like make up until you have X amount, or check the stocks, so on and so forth. It's really important to have a manager. And a broker is the person that will use their praise skill to trade with trade caravans. And then the bookkeeper keeps track of your stockpile. So without a bookkeeper, it's going to be like, you have roughly 60 drinks. You have roughly 20 plump helmets. Whereas a bookkeeper with like high levels of precision, which is 5, will be like, you have, 64 drinks and 22 plump helmets. And it's actually really nice to know how much stock you have. And also just to know how valuable your fortress is. For this to work, our leader here, who's going to be renamed anyway, is going to need a study pretty early on in his own or her own bedroom, and we'll deal with that later. All right, so what else? Is there anything? Another thing to do before I even start to unpause is build a animal pasture. So down here, there is a zones or Z, and we hit pasture. The animals that we brought with us, because we have a considerable amount of animals, I randomed this, of course. The animals that we have with us are going to need to eat, right? So I'm going to drag a pasture zone like here. And then put the animals into the pasture, especially the water buffalo, which requires one because it grazes. And this will keep the animals from wandering off into somewhere dangerous or not being able to graze for food, etc. And I'm going to call this default pasture. Fair enough. All right. Now, for the dwarves themselves, because I haven't actually identified what they're good at. Here's our expedition leader. He is 75 years old, and you are going to be named Scorpio. Scorpio, the leader. And Scorpio is an adequate organizer. He can negotiate, persuade, dance, has some knowledge of stuff. Cool. He hates craft work and is not musical. Okay. Good creativity, good spatial sense, willpower, way with words. All right. All right. I'm going to rename 2 others. So our primary miner, I'm going to rename as well. So you are going to be named Liara. And I'm not going to name every dwarf because there's just, you end up getting a lot of dwarves, but the more prominent ones I'll rename. And they're a proficient miner. Got it. Great sense of empathy. Oh, that's good. All right, last but not least, the planter is going to also have a custom name. And these are the 3 that I think are going to remain in their roles for a long time, which is why I'm renaming them. I'll just name you Tall. There you go. You're short for someone named Tall. All right. In terms of what we actually physically have, we start off with an anvil, which you really want to start off with. It's very difficult to start without one because you'll need to trade for one pretty early on. We have some basic armor, but it's basically clothing. It's not really armor. We have some bags of stuff, some cave spider silks, sheep wool, bags of like seeds and the like, some barrels with some starting resources, some buckets which are empty, some chains and cloth, crutches if we get hurt, dwarven ales, so 20 of each, some fish, some footwear, and handwear, and legwear, a few logs, but not many, a few prepared meats, some plants, the plump helmets, which will be brewed, some quivers, a bunch of seeds, splints, threads, tools, and weapons. Weapons is probably the most important because I only have 3 copper picks. So as you can see in the labors here, I assigned 3 miners. And in fact, for Liara, I'm going to lock her out from doing other tasks. I'm almost certainly going to always have mining tasks to be done, so I don't want her to do anything else. She is required to mine and mine only. That's all she does. And she is a proficient miner, and she will only level up from there. Okay. If we hit F1, it centers on the wagon that we have. And I think what I want to do is not settle so close to the map edge, because if enemies are coming and they come from the western north, I don't get a lot of alerts as they are like at the map edge. So when designing the entrance to your fortress, when you have trade caravans, they require like ramps to enter. So I'm going to be designing my fortress with ramps in mind. Now, using the mouse wheel, just below us, we have, this does not look like soil. Kaolinite. Oh, nice. Some coal. There is fire clay up in the north. Oh, okay, I see. So I think what's happening, because of the map tile I settled, is the only arable soil for farming is in the northwest. So I can't stray too far from the northwest tile, because if I do, we will lose access to farmland, which is fine. I'm okay with that constraint. So from big picture, what I'm planning on doing is to have the entrance to our fortress be around here, and then a ramp going to the west, down a few levels, where then I can build a staircase up to the soil, if that makes sense. So let's start that. In order to start my ramp, what I'm going to do is I'm going to channel out the earth. And right here, let's see. Right here looks like a pretty good place to do it. And then while I'm mining, and actually let's require all of our miners to mine. While I'm mining, everyone else can start to collect random plants that are in the wild, because I might be able to brew with them or cook with them. But I intentionally left the area that is my pasture alone from collection, so that there's like stuff to graze for my grazing animals. So my miners will be channeling out and mining a ramp, whereas everyone else is collecting wild crop. And let's unpause. Now this button up here, or R, shows you like a visual indicator where your ramps are, which I find useful, so I'm going to leave them on. So just below the surface, we have jet, which is a type of rock. So I'm going to ramp there, mine here, and it's going to be ramp, mine, ramp, mine, ramp, mine. And I'm only going to go down a few tiles. I don't need to be super subterranean. So there's shale and jet. Got it. The other thing to consider is I might actually physically be, at some point, be beneath the ponds or lake, which could be useful as access to a water source. Dwarves can drink water, but they hate it. But the reason to be near a water source is it's really good for medicine. You can, when people are injured, they need their wounds cleaned, and it's wise to be near water for that reason. Alright, so we are at elevation 49 as the surface, and down at 46, I think I'm going to start the actual fortress. So what I want to do here is I want somewhat of a long runway, if you will. And the long runway is so that I can visibly see the eventual intention is to have some sort of like drawbridge. So a longer runway will give me more time to accommodate said drawbridge. And then the first room, when you come into the fortress, is going to be our trade depot room. But this initial room is going to serve a lot of purposes early on because I don't have a lot of infrastructure built. So a trade depot, if you go to buildings, trade depot is a 5x5. And when a trade caravan arrives, they have to traverse the map tile outside and come to your trade depot. Your trade depot could be outside, that'd be fine. The problem is, if you put it outside, anytime there's traders that trade, you have to bring goods to barter. There isn't not coins. So, like, normally what it would be like is trade depot comes up and you want to buy seeds and meat and leather and cloth, and then you sell them the gems that you've mined up, or the rock crafts, like trinkets and the like, bone craft stuff. But you have to physically bring that stuff from your stockpile to the trade depot. So the further your trade depot is from your stockpile, the more annoying it is to do the trading. So I don't like to put my trade depot outside. Additionally, the caravans are wagons, eventually, and they require ramps because wagons can't go on stairs. So I'm going to put the trade depot somewhere around here. Like, let's put it, let's see. I want a rather large room. Maybe like a 15 by 15. And the trade depot will be smack dab in the middle of that room. Which I will eventually mine out. I just don't want to do it just yet, because the first trade is going to come right before winter sets in. So, the current priority right now is to plan out the initial fortress. Also, Icarus, Mindsettle, McSaint, Airdog, Crimson, Ciceron, Dennis Keith, and DM Chags. Thank you for the resubs and the cheers. All right. Again, back to big picture. The reason to keep your trade depot and... Okay, even bigger picture, actually. There's two types of people that will be in your fortress. Citizens and non-citizens. The reason I say non-citizens is just because they're non-citizen doesn't even mean they're hostile. Non-citizen could be a visitor, visiting your taverns and inns. It could be a pilgrim, making a pilgrimage to your temples. It could be a trader, so on and so forth. And the reason I mention this is you can't necessarily trust non-citizens. Hell, you can barely even trust your own citizens. Sometimes your own citizens are masquerading as like vampires or werewolves. But a good fortress design makes sure that you can't get... that it can't like backdoor you. So the trade depot and the temples potentially and the taverns should not be deeply incorporated into your fortress because you might need to lock down. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that a tavern fight breaks out and a lot of the visitors just go berserk and try to start murdering everyone for whatever reason. It doesn't even matter what the reason is. If you don't have a method of restricting access to the tavern, basically putting into lockdown, some sort of security lockdown, that fighting can spill over to the rest of your fortress and kill everyone. Or, alternatively, if a giant enemy on the surface showed up and you weren't able to lower the drawbridge in time, and it got inside. If it gets inside, it's likely going to spend a long time killing people in the first few rooms it encounters, which could be your tavern, inns, and temples, rather than your craftsmen and administration. It's not to say that I'm trying to sacrifice people that are coming to the tavern, but if people were to die, I'd rather it not be my own citizens, is all I'm saying. So, to that end, to the north and south of this, like, trade depot area, what I'm going to do is I'm going to eventually have it be... And I don't want to mine it out now. This is just, like, big picture planning. I'm eventually going to have it be something like temples and taverns, whereas the rest of my people live to the west of here, and then we'll stairwell down, and we'll live a floor below this stuff. That's the idea. So that's the big picture. So we'll have I'm gonna very crudely paint this just as a reminder, and this is not the actual plan. This is just like a reminder. So this will be like a tavern and a temple. And taverns and temples are, like, different than dining halls for my own people. So these are just additions much later on that I don't need to worry about right now. So I'm going to go back to unpausing the game and start to excavate this. And what I want to do right off the start is I would like to move all of our goods that are on the surface here in this wagon to down below into this sort of, like, temporary stockroom area. And in fact, I'm going to add a new zone. So the wagon arrival location, I'm going to call surface. If I could spell. And then this location where I am right now is going to be trade depot. So if I hit F2, it centers right here. F1 is where the wagon is, which is also happens to be the surface. And here's my miners excavating, and they are excavating a shale layer. So shale is not a flux stone. Normally what I would have done is I would have started my fortress on a flux stone layer, because then I have a lot of, like, flux stone to work with when I'm metalworking. But in this case, I didn't want to go low enough to bother with flux stone, plus there might be flux stone below me anyway. So this is a 15 wide hallway, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have another 15 wide hallway. And that way, if I have an airlock here and an airlock here, there's many attempts to block access to my deeper fortress. Basically, I don't want people coming in. I want the ability to keep them out. But for now, everything is going to be stored here. So this is going to be an all stockpile. And all stockpiles forbids refuse and corpses. So this is temp stockpile. Alright, up to the surface, there's another stockpile that I haven't yet put in, which is a garbage dump. So garbage dump is exactly what you would think. It's a place to dump your garbage. And we're going to call it surface dump. The reason for this is some things will rot. Like animal skins that haven't been tanned in the leather rots really quickly, or, you know, stuff like that. And when things rot, they produce miasma. And your dwarves do not like to breathe in miasma. They just don't. Who'd have thunk? So keeping a garbage dump surface side will dissipate the miasma so that our dwarves aren't choking on nasty. And all of the stockpiles that I'm putting in here are all very temporary. I just want to stress that early on, we can't just be like, ooh, big fortress, right? So I'm having to like make do with makeshift stuff. Speaking about makeshift stuff, I want to get my first two temporary workplaces. So I'm going to do a stoneworker here, made of shale, and I'll do a carpenter here, made of shale. Additionally, I would like to identify a tree on the surface that I want to primarily make my stuff out of. So we have willows along the water. Here, it's maybe easier for you to see it like this. Hazels, willow, plum, cherry, apple. If I could leave the fruit-bearing trees alone, because fruit-bearing trees can drop fruit, maybe what I'll do is I will harvest hazel trees. Or, sorry, willow trees. So the woodworker that I have... Oop, that's not what I meant to do. The woodworker that I have is only going to be able to do woodworking for now. And I'm going to select cut the willow trees on the surface so that we can start to stockpile wood. And I'm only going to take willows. With that said, almost everything I make will be made out of stone anyway. But it is nice to have willows for, like, bins and beds, or it's nice to have wood for beds, because there isn't an easy alternative to wood beds. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of willow trees. Good. And we're just excavating out this initial area, and I think I won't even excavate this hallway just yet. And you can see the planters, the seed collection, they're starting to dump their random seeds. So like prickleberries, for instance, is something you can brew out of. So if we go to the work order for the kitchen, we collected some barley, which we'll brew. We collected some long yam plants, which we can only cook with. Strawberry plants, which we cook with, but prickleberries we can brew. So I'm going to not allow it for cooking. Wild carrots we can brew. Rope seeds we can only brew. But basically, if it can be brewed, I will only brew it. If that makes sense. Because alcohol is honestly more important. That's right. We're drunk dwarves. We're born alcoholics. And there you go. You can see the collection of willows now. So once our woodworker who's cutting down the trees are done, we can have them go back to standard work. I'm going to modify this stockpile to be much larger because I am, without a doubt, going to fill this thing up fast. Thank you for tuning in to Dwarf Fortress, which originally streamed live on Twitch. If you have any feedback or questions for me, let me know in the comments below. If you would like to catch a live stream of mine, Rhodamont.com has my stream schedule and countdown timers to upcoming streams. If you'd like to join my online gaming community on Discord, Rhodamont.com has a link to it, as does the description of this video. Thank you so very much for watching. Special thank you to my Twitch subscribers, Patreon patrons, and viewers like you that support the channel and made it all the way to the credits. Thank you so very much. I hope to catch you next episode or an upcoming stream. Farewell, my fellow dwarves.